Hey there, folks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to give everybody about 45 seconds to a minute just to make sure everyone has time to log off of their previous meetings and get to this one. Thank you again for joining us. If you have a chance while we're waiting, go ahead and plug in your location that you're joining us from in the chat. John Cannon and I will be joined. Well, I will be joining from Austin, Texas. John Cannon is in Georgia. All right, Tampa, Florida, Marietta, Georgia, Norwich, New York, Indianapolis, Indiana. We got folks from all over. Love to see it. Querétaro, Mexico. Prescott, Arizona. Beaverton, Oregon. Excellent. Got a good group of folks here today. Excuse me, folks. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, folks. Thank you for joining us today for Season 9 of the Cargo Chronicles. Today's episode will be the U.S.-focused episode. With myself, I am Danny Ramone, Director of Intelligence and Response here at Overhaul. We do want to remind everybody who's here today, the Q2 U.S. report is due out this coming Monday. We're going to be giving you guys a sneak preview of that today, as well as answering a Q&A session from some pre-submitted questions that we have. If you have any questions you have right now, or if you think of any questions along the way, feel free to plug those in the Q&A section over on the the right-hand side of the screen. And additionally, at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see a free risk assessment button. If you have any questions that go a little bit beyond what you'd like to ask in today's public forum, or if you'd like to get a little bit more in-depth assessment or a demo and see how the sausage is made and how Overhaul can help protect your supply chain, definitely hit that free risk assessment button, and we will be in touch to schedule that free assessment and or demo, whichever one you would prefer. Without any further ado, though, our next guest on today's episode is going to be John Cannon. He's our senior law enforcement liaison here at Overhaul. John, if you want to go ahead and come up on stage and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Cannon. I'm one of the law enforcement liaisons for Overhaul. Been with the company about 5 years now. Previously, I was worked for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and I ran the cargo theft unit in Georgia for about 12 years before I retired.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to give you guys, like I said, a quick overview of what's coming in the Q2 U.S. report, looking at Q2 of this year and what we've seen in terms of cargo theft trends. That report does come out on Monday, which you guys will have a chance to download and review that report at your leisure. I do want to kind of speed through the statistics, though, because we got quite a healthy round of Q&As or questions that we're going to answer. So I want to make sure and get to as many questions as we can. But let's go ahead and dive into the material. Some of the things that I want to bring up, that we're going to be looking at in the Q2 25 report is analysis of exactly when and where these thefts are happening, what exactly they're targeting and how they're targeting them. Some of the things that we're going to go over in terms of trends is we've seen some pretty significant shifts in state volume. We're going to look at the reasons behind that, and we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the Southern California red zone. All right, so the first thing that we're looking at here is the chart that we release every year. We've been releasing it every year at the beginning of every year that has a forecast of the year to come. We wanted to go ahead and update that at the midway point of the year to give the forecast for the remainder of 2025. So some things I want to just point out about where we are in Q2 of 2025 so far. We did have a slight increase in Q2 compared to Q1 of this year, about 4%. Keeping in mind that Q1 of this year was another record-breaking quarter, right? But compared to Q2 of last year, it's actually 33% higher. Again, this is pretty significant, considering that the United States increased 10% compared to the same period in 2024. If you look at the first half of 2025 versus the first half of 2024, and a lot of people are going to say 4% compared to Q1, 10% compared to H1 of last year, not a big jump. Which is true, but you got to keep in mind that those 4%, that 10% is on top. It's compounded on top of year over year, over quarter of record-breaking cargo theft. So once again, we're in record-breaking territory. We're seeing quite a bit of activity, and we're expecting that we're going to see about, a 19% increase for the second half of the year is what we're currently tracking. Next slide, please. Here we go. We're going to take a look at where thefts are happening. As I mentioned, there's been a little bit of shift in the state pattern that we're seeing. And what we're seeing is a kind of a re-centralization around California, right? We've seen over the past couple of years, thefts start to spread out, especially along I-10 and I-40 in Arizona, New Mexico, and into Texas. Uh, what looks like is happening, or what happened in Q2, was quite a bit of tariff uncertainty, caused a lot of folks to sort of front load their imports. A lot of cargo was coming into California, and I think a lot of the efforts reconcentrated around California that had spread out into Arizona and New Mexico. That said, if you look to the eastern half of the country, those weren't affected the same way. Those states were not affected in the same way. They didn't see their activity re-centralized around California because they're not as close to California. So we saw some increase in some of the states on the eastern side, such as Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and especially Illinois. We saw increases in those states compared to previous reporting periods. John, is there anything you want to say specifically about California, Arizona, or New Mexico?
Yeah, just to agree with what you said about the we're going to see some upticks in the coming months, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it's yet to be seen if the reconcentration of thefts in California is going to continue. A lot of that, like I said, is being driven by tariff uncertainty, but we're starting to see a lot of these trade deals be hammered out. At least preliminary outlines are being hammered out. So as that situation starts to stabilize, hopefully so would the import volume. And I don't want to say hopefully that would be the return to the new normal, because the new normal for us right now is not great, right, guys? But it's just something to keep in mind. California is always going to be a risk, and Arizona and New Mexico are always going to be a risk heading out of California. It's just it's yet to be seen how much of that activity is going to stay centered within California because of the influx of cargo. But let's take a look.
One thing I'd like to add, just pay attention to the red zones and the hot zones when you're shipping in that area, and make sure you don't stop in any of those areas unless it's absolutely necessary. And if you do, make sure you take proper protocols to protect your freight.
Absolutely. We'll be taking a deep dive, like I said, a little bit later into the California red zone, the Southern California red zone specifically, and taking a look at exactly where within that red zone thefts are more or most prevalent. All right, let's go ahead and hit the next slide, please. Again, just real quick, want to kind of breeze through this. You'll have the chance to review this when the report is released on Monday. But the thing that I want to point out about this is largely the flattening of the curve, which is continuing to happen. And the reason that that's happening, we used to see a big spike of thefts in darkness hours, so 6 p.m. to midnight and midnight to 6 a.m., where when we would see a lot of thefts happen as far as time of day. And we used to see a lot of thefts as far as day of the week happening Friday, over the weekend, and Monday, or at least it would be front loaded on Monday because that's when a lot of them were discovered. We're starting to see this flattening of the curve across all days of the week and across all times of day, because cargo theft has diversified. Those trends that we used to see were trends that were built around full truckload cargo theft, right? Straight theft, where the criminals are just taking the tractor trailer from the official driver when it's unattended. Well, now we're dealing with several different buckets of criminal, right? We're dealing with the straight theft folks who still commit theft the way that they used to. We're dealing with strategic theft and fraudulent theft folks who've got a variety of methods that do not depend on time of day or day of the week. And then we've got large scale pilferage folks as well, who again are going to be driven more by opportunity than they are by what day of the week or time of day it is. So because of this, because of how diverse cargo theft has become, the trends are no longer evident when you're analyzing the data as a whole. If you want to get down to specific trends, you have to drill down into specific MOs, you have to drill down into specific product types that are being targeted, and you have to drill down into specific areas of the country to see exactly what's happening in those places. But let's go ahead and hit the next slide. Once again, just real brief, want to touch on some of the things that we see. Theft by product type, we're seeing obviously a lot of targeting around electronics and home and garden as well. One of the main things that we see targeted in the home and garden section is going to be appliances, washers, dryers, refrigerators, air conditioners, things like that. And we did see quite a big chunk of the thefts in this particular quarter come from pilferage. Pilferage does account for both over the rail and over the road in this particular data set. And I do want to point out cargo theft by location has 37% for warehouse and DC. Warehouse and DC is also the default location for any strategic theft. If it is stolen fraudulently, it is uplifted from the origin, and at that point it is in possession of the criminals or within the criminal network. So the location of the theft at that point gets classified as warehouse or DC. So that would explain the 37% within that section. But of course, it's always good to note 21% after that in theft by location is truck stops and fuel stations, which are always vulnerable, always being stalked by the organized cargo criminal, especially those who are performing large scale pilferage. Tends to be a big problem in Arizona. Folks will pick up the trail of tractor trailers that are departing from California. They'll usually wait in or around Kingman, Arizona, and they'll either wait for them to stop there or they'll follow them until they do stop, usually somewhere else in Arizona. Next slide, please, Holly. Thank you much. We're going to take a look again real quick at this Southern California red zone. You can see the concentric circles that we have drawn at every 50-mile radius. And we've got a breakdown of what percentage of thefts happens within all of those. So when we're looking at it, we're talking about the red zone being the first 200 to 250 miles, depending on your risk tolerance. We still see that within 50 miles is 61% of the thefts that happen in this particular area. So it's very common that folks will leave origin and either stage somewhere or go somewhere to double load or transload, or possibly be repowered by a long haul driver. And that's a very dangerous practice. As soon as you depart, if you've got high targeted cargo in the back of that trailer, you want to make sure that driver is able to get on the road and exit the red zone as soon as possible. But in addition to that, we do also have data showing that increasing thefts are happening beyond the 200-mile red zone. So we are showing criminals are more and more willing to travel further and further in pursuit of their targeted theft. John, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, especially about the following it more than 200 miles. Once they've identified a particular shipment that they're interested in and going to steal it and dedicated to that theft, they're going to follow it till they get to opportunity. And we've seen them several hundred miles outside the 200-mile radius strike and steal the cargo. So be aware of that, and just make sure you got proper procedures in place. When they stop, they're going to have to stop for gas and for food. Just make sure that they park in a safe place, or if they got team drivers, that one of the drivers stays with the load. A lot of times that doesn't happen. They'll both go in together. So just make sure those things are in place and make sure they're followed, procedures are followed.
Excellent. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Make sure you've got those procedures outlined well in advance, right? Trying to hammer out policies and procedures in the middle of a theft or recovery event is never a good time. But folks, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A section. Like I mentioned, we got quite a few questions submitted in advance. We're going to try and answer as many of those as possible. Real quick, if you want to ask more questions, feel free to go to the Q&A section. I do see one question that was asked in the general chat. I do want to address that real quick before I switch my screen over. The question is, from a cargo security perspective, what do you think would be the effect of the planned Union Pacific Norfolk Southern rail merger? From a cargo security perspective, it's going to be tough to say. Theoretically, if a container has to make less transfers when traveling from one coast to another coast, that's going to be more secure. The less time it spends stationary, the less time it's going to be at risk. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that the majority of risk for rail pilferage comes from the geography that it's in. Unlike over-the-road thefts or strategic theft or straight theft, this is a place where you actually can look at a heat map and see where you're going to have the most problems, because the problems here are based on exactly where it is. So that said, that's not going to change. The locations that the cargo travels through, if it's traveling through risky areas, through risky supply chain nodes, if it still has to transit those areas, our Chicagos, our Atlantas, our Memphises, it's still going to be at the same level of risk. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Q&A side. Here we go. And what are the best ways to convince police to accept a report from a remote 3PL employee? They typically want to dispatch an officer in person to take a report, but often our shippers are at warehouses and not the cargo owner. This is a great question. John, you want to take this one?
Yeah, it is a great question, and we've dealt with that numerous times. And the answer really is it depends. What I would do and what the best practices are is go ahead before you have an issue, go ahead and make contact with the agencies where your company is located at, and talk with them, understand what their procedures are, what their policies are about taking thefts, and go ahead and iron that out before you have an issue at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to get in touch with someone and report that theft. And trust me, that's not the time to be handling a situation like that. But go ahead and prepare in advance. I always like to say, have a plan. Put that plan together, get your team together from anyone that's involved in the shipment of that freight. Sit down, have a meeting, go over the things that you think or that might come up, and go ahead and seek a resolution for those. Once you get that plan in place, practice that plan, and once you do that, implement it, and then make sure everybody knows how that plan works. And that way, when you have the issue at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know that department, what they're going to ask you, what they're going to send out there. If you need to already have some type of legal document from the owner of the cargo to make that report, that stuff needs to be handled in advance, so you're not dealing with it at 2 o'clock. And trust me, it's hard to find people to handle stuff like that at 2 o'clock in the morning. So go ahead and prepare in advance before the storm hits. Go ahead and make sure that you have everything in place that you need, and it can be handled without you having to deal with it in the middle of the storm. That's the best advice I can give you on that one.
That is great advice, John, and 100% true. There's a lot of folks out there who talk about, like, notifications is the end all be all when it comes to security. If you have notification of a problem, which is the first step, 100%. But those folks who say once you have notification, everything's taken care of, you can just call the cops and it'll be fine. Really, to me, that is like, well, you've never had to engage police on a cargo theft in a state that you're not sitting in, and it kind of shows. But yeah, that's a great point, John. That's great advice on all points there.
Yeah, just keep in mind that the officer responding is probably going to be a uniformed officer, and you have to make sure he's probably never had a cargo theft report in his life. And so that's another thing that you're going to have to deal with. So go ahead and contact your department where you're located at, sit down and talk with them, and kind of educate them on what's going to happen and what's going on with this, so they can prepare and educate their officers. So have that done in advance is the best advice I can give you about that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, can we discuss any trends in pharmaceutical thefts? We'd love to. Pharmaceuticals are absolutely still a high target item, even if they are not as commonly obtained by the cargo thief. They're still being pursued. When we talk about trends, unfortunately, you need a certain level of data to start determining trends. There's not been a huge amount of pharmaceutical thefts to try and determine trends. Like I said, it's still being targeted. We've seen strategic theft, we've seen straight theft, both in the last 2 years, targeting full truckload pharmaceutical products. I will say, by and large, the pharma industry is the most buttoned up in terms of supply chain security. So they tend to have the most robust security programs in place. And if something does strike pharma, it tends to be on the lower security end of the spectrum for pharma. We haven't seen any major high security pharma thefts in the last several years. So that's good to know. But I would say, I would always caution continued vigilance, because we do know the criminals are still targeting, and we have to be on the ball 100% of the time and correct 100% of the time. They've only got to be correct once, right? So just keep that in mind. Let's see, has AI impacted MO or shifted theft trends? I wouldn't say it's shifted trends. It's accelerated some. It's a force multiplier, just like it is in the corporate world, but it's not a replacement for people. It does allow the folks who are committing fraud to cast a wider net and to cast that net much faster. And it's allowed, a lot of the social engineering and phishing schemes to become much more sophisticated, because they don't have the same obvious spelling and grammatical errors and missed punctuation and things like that, because they're being written by AI bots. So it's not quite as easy to spot that Nigerian prince scam coming in through the email. So I wouldn't say it's changing the trends. It is accelerating them and acting as a force multiplier for those that use technology, but it hasn't actually caused any new MOs as of yet. Are these tapes to send to clients for replay? Unfortunately, no, we don't tape these to send them out because they are topical and timely. So we don't really want the recordings hanging around for too long and somebody getting old information. That being said, there will be a highlight reel released at some point, I'm sure. The Q1 report, as I mentioned, will be released on Monday, and that will be free to download from our website, over-hall.com. And you can forward that on as you wish. And if you have further questions, by all means, hit that free risk assessment button. We'll schedule a one-on-one with y'all. All right, here we've got another one that will probably be good for you to cover, John.
Okay.
Can we cover legal frameworks that will strengthen prosecution of these theft crimes?
Yeah, I think if I understand that correctly, make sure when you have a theft that you maintain all the evidence regarding that theft and maintain it in such a way that you can provide it to law enforcement that they can use it for evidence in the prosecution of these cargo thieves. And I'm talking about any documents, any recordings, any emails, anything that's going to help them at some point identify the perpetrators. I think that's something important to make sure you get to the police so they can properly investigate it and include it as a part of the prosecution. It's always important to keep that stuff, and it's also important to, I think one thing that's also important is once you provided all that and you're involved in the case, stay involved with the law enforcement officers, stay in contact with them. If they need something, make sure you get it to them in a timely manner, and also get involved with the prosecutor and make sure you stay connected with him. Make sure you show up in court when you need to show up in court, because it's hard for them to cut a deal with a guy with you sitting out there. So I've always said that. Make sure if you're the victim in this, make sure you cooperate and you're present at all legal hearings if possible, and stay involved with the prosecutor and be present out there. So I think that's some of the best advice I can give you as far as providing that information to help in the prosecution. But anytime you just contact them timely, provide them with all the information, and just stay involved with them and stay, help them, anything they need, help them to provide it.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. And like John mentioned, make sure you're staying involved after the recovery. If there's a recovery, don't drop your law enforcement support there because they got your stuff back. Make sure you help all the way through the prosecution process.
Yeah, that's one good point, Danny. That's absolutely right, is because when they recover this stuff, they're probably not going to have the facilities to store it. So just make sure you're involved with them and make sure you help them in any way you can to dispose of the property and inventory the property. Make sure the inventory is done as they advise you to do it. If you've got multiple different recovered cargo on one trailer, if it's unloaded, make sure you inventory it like they ask, and so that helps in the prosecution also.
Yeah. Absolutely. Folks, I do want to give you all a warning. We will likely go over by a few minutes of the scheduled time for this meeting because we do have a lot of questions. I want to get to as many as possible. So just give you that advanced heads up in case that's handy. Next question. Do you use single-use GPS trackers and shipments for recovery options? Absolutely. That is one of the weapons in our arsenal. What exactly we recommend is going to depend specifically on your supply chain, what you're shipping, where you're shipping it from, who your supply chain partners are, and what your current security posture is, right? So it's not a magic bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but single-use GPS trackers are absolutely a part of our arsenal, and they're an indispensable part of our arsenal as one of the layers that we recommend in a layered security program. But again, if you want to find out exactly what would be the best fit for your supply chain, hit that free risk assessment button. We'd be happy to assess your supply chain and give you a quote for what would be the best fit for your particular situation. All right, here we've got another one that I think is going to be good for John. When a theft occurs, what's the most common thing you hear about that they wished they would have done?
I think the most common thing I hear is that they weren't prepared, and they didn't properly vet the carrier that's got it, or they didn't have proper procedures or protocols in place to prevent the theft. I think that's probably the most common thing I hear is basically they didn't do their job like they should have done it, and they got taken advantage of. And when you don't have the proper procedures and protocols in place to prevent the thefts, and they take advantage of you, they're gonna exploit them. They're gonna find them. And trust me, they're going to keep digging until they find a way to get the cargo if you're not properly protected, you don't properly vet your partners, know who you're doing business with. That's some of the best advice. I mean, I know who your transportation partners are, and don't give a high value shipment to a guy from the first time he's ever hauled a load for you. Don't ever do that. That's some of the things I've heard before. I shouldn't have given it to this particular carrier. I really didn't know him. But just make sure that you properly vet all your transportation partners and know who you're doing business with, know who you're talking to. Just don't try to get rid of the shipment so you can get home early on Friday. Do your job, make sure you do it properly, vet these people before you let them have it.
I think, it speaks to vetting, but I think the one thing that I've heard the most, and I hear a lot of things, and they all kind of tie back to, I should have been prepared. But the one factor I hear the most is I should have made that phone call, right? It's like something wasn't right, something was fishy, there was a red flag. I should have made that phone call to the carrier to verify their driver information. I should have made that phone call to the broker to verify that this is who is supposed to be here. I should have made that phone call that would have prevented me from giving this load to this fraudulent driver, right? People talk about it all the time, the $1 million phone call, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that's just something you need to do is know who you're doing business with. I can't stress that enough. And that comes to making that phone call. That comes to knowing who's on the other end of it.
Absolutely. All right, here we've got a good one. Can you provide an overview of the current legislation being reviewed in the House/Senate? If enacted, what impact would you anticipate it having, and on what timeline? All right, so folks, if you're not aware, it is we're speaking about the CORCA bill that is passing through the U.S. Senate. It's Combating Organized Retail Crime Act of 2025, and they have lumped cargo theft into this, which is great. I think that a big reason for that is if you don't have visibility in your supply chain, you're not sure if your losses are actually occurring as part of the supply chain or if they're occurring at the point of retail sale. Because quite often, once they leave the warehouse or the point of manufacture, the next time a thorough piece count summary is done is going to be at the point of sale. And if it's discovered there, that's usually where it's attributed. So lack of visibility can misattribute a lot of retail shrinkage. It will be misattributed. A lot of cargo theft may be misattributed as retail shrinkage. But I want to read from the summary, the official summary from judiciary.senate.gov, and then we'll talk about some thoughts that John and I have on this. What matters here is Section 4, the establishment of a center to combat organized retail and supply chain crime. It mandates the creation of an organized retail and supply chain crime coordination center within Homeland Security investigations at the Department of Homeland Security. 2, coordinate federal, state, and local law enforcement efforts against organized retail crime and supply chain crime, to partner with private industry to share threat information and collaborate on investigations, to track trends and issue annual public reports, to review and optimize grant programs and training to enhance enforcement, and to issue a report to Congress on its progress. And this organization will sunset after 7 years unless it's extended. So basically, they're talking about creating a centralized federal office that will be the single contact point for reporting cargo theft, and also for connecting the various jurisdictions that are going to be involved with investigating and recovering, which is just 100% necessary because by nature, supply chain thefts are 99% of the time going to cross jurisdictions. So that is definitely needed. John, you want to talk about how effective we think it might be, or when it might happen, what the timeline on this is going to be?
I'm not sure with the timeline, but I think probably they're going to be targeting the organized groups that are, like you mentioned earlier, multi-jurisdictional interstate thieves that are operating in California all the way to the East Coast. And I think that's going to be the ones that they target. Again, back as far as getting these particular cases investigated by federal authorities, I mean, that goes back to relationships also. If you've got, back when I was working, you had good relationships with a good federal partner, you really didn't have any issues getting it investigated. But if you don't, and it just depends on where you're at in the country also. That has a lot to do with whether you're going to get, that type of cooperation. I know HSI has been involved in several of the organized groups around the country. Bobby and I went up to Ohio, and they actually did some warrants up there and recovered some property. So they're involved in some of these investigations, which is a good thing. So I think it can be a good thing if it comes to pass, but that's something I'm taking a kind of a wait and see attitude with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's going to move at the speed and efficacy of government. Take that however you will.
Go ahead and build those relationships with your local guys.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start doing that now, anyways.
Yep.
Let's see here. It seems as though there's a large number of cargo thefts in Philadelphia. Can you explain why and what, if anything, law enforcement's doing about it? John, you and Bobby were in that area recently.
Is that the Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's the Philadelphia crew. We've noted that there's a crew out there, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. Seems to be doing a lot of thefts, primarily overnight, and primarily targeting meat and seafood and other food products.
Right.
But they do touch on some other things as well.
Right. One thing that we've done here at Overhaul is we participated in training across the country at different law enforcement agencies. I've been to several states. Bobby's going to Mississippi in a couple of weeks to train the Mississippi Highway Patrol with some other guys that we actually travel around the country training law enforcement on cargo theft. And I recently went to Pennsylvania and met with the Pennsylvania State Police. There were people there from Philadelphia who attended the training. So they know they have a problem. They asked us to come up there and give them some training on how to investigate these type cases, which we did. And that's one thing Overhaul has done with our partners to go and train these agencies and make them aware of the types of cargo theft that's happening, some of the trends that we're seeing. And I think they're going to becoming a lot more active as far as the investigative side in Pennsylvania, was what my takeaway from that was.
Awesome. No, yeah, absolutely. It's tough to see, all these problems popping up across the country and law enforcement not having the proper resources allocated to them to be able to deal with it.
That's one thing. That's one thing that we've done at Overhaul is make sure that we try to participate and help train these police agencies that want to have that training in cargo theft. And we've, like I said, we've traveled all over the country and met with departments and trained their officers and advised them on what to look for and the trends and stuff like that. And they keep asking, and we're going to keep going.
Yep, 100%. All right, let's see here. When will you expand your services in Latin America? Currently, we have services in Latin America. We have recovery operations going on there every day and prevention going on there every day as well. We've got intelligence reports coming out of there. We actually held the Cargo Chronicles Mexico edition episode was yesterday. So we currently have services in Latin America. If you'd like to find out more about those, definitely hit that free risk assessment button. We'd be happy to brief you on exactly what our capabilities in LATAM are. Mexico, Brazil, and South America are all covered. What are the biggest and emerging trends in cargo theft incidents? Speaking quickly, strategic theft, large scale pilferage. Those are the two biggest things driving increases in volume and sophistication in cargo theft in the U.S. right now. Any update on the political situation near Palestine, Israel, and Iran? Do we have any issues with shipping in this area? If I had additional political insight on Palestine, Israel, and Iran, I might have a different job. But we've all got the same news. Things are tense there. The Suez Canal, not great. Basically closed. And it's taking 14 additional days to move from Asia to Europe now, right? So that's basically what it is. Everybody's tense and watching the news. But I don't have any additional updates other than what's available in the news right now. Here we go. This is a good one for John. Why is Bobby Motley so grumpy in the middle of the night?
I can imagine who probably asked that question.
We got a couple suspects.
I agree. You know, I've been working with Bobby almost 20 years now, and he and I are a lot alike, and don't misunderstand our grumpiness with our passion to put these cargo thieves in jail. So he's I expect there's going to be some payback for that question. So, but no.
there might be, but if for all of us on the call who know Bobby Motley, we all know he needs his beauty sleep, so we try not to interrupt him. All right, let's see here. What are any new best practices to prevent fraudulent pickups from bad actors? Folks, it's nothing new. It is the full-throated, layered security program. Vet your carriers, vet your brokers, vet your drivers through all means available to you, not just one. Don't just check a box and move on. Be thorough when you're vetting your network. So use all the tools that you have access to, would be my advice on that one. And as John says, make sure you've got all your policies and procedures spelled out before the fact, right? John always says it to me this way, which is dig your well before you're thirsty. And boy, that makes sense. Make sure you've got everything documented. That way, if at 2:00 in the morning, somebody new to the process is trying to run through it, they've got something to refer to that spells out exactly what needs to happen. In the event of a recovery and investigation, but for vetting, make sure that you, like I said, you're using all tools available to you.
Yeah, don't let that keep you up at night worrying about whether or not you've done the right thing, whether you're prepared or not. Know that you're prepared so you can sleep well. And if you do have an incident, everything that you need is there at your fingertips. You know who to call, and you know who's going to respond. And trust me, that's a big deal. Because back when I was still working with GBI, I mean, I had people call me at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and tell me they had a cargo theft. And I said, all right, well, send me the info. I said, well, we're still working on getting that. And, that's not the answer that law enforcement wants to hear. They want to be able, you provide them with the video, the truck information, the driver information, all that information that they're going to need to investigate that and try their best to recover your property. Have that at your fingertips. Don't have to go deal with that, looking for that, and take 2 or 3 hours. Go ahead and have that ready. And I've got a whole presentation about how to plan and prepare if you have a cargo theft, and I can talk about that for hours. But just make sure you have everything you need and know who to call.
Exactly. All right, let's take a look at some more of these questions. Apologies, folks, if I'm not getting to your question. Again, we do have availability for one-on-one demos and assessments. If you hit that button, if I'm not able to get to your question. How has the use of more autonomous trucks affected theft risk, if at all? So that's interesting. I don't think we've seen enough autonomous trucks on the road to determine how it's going to impact theft. Now, in the U.S., we always say that cargo at rest is cargo at risk, right? So obviously autonomous trucks are not going to stop as often. So that's going to eliminate or mitigate some risk in that area. But then when they do stop and do have to fuel, they're not going to have a human on board. They're not going to have a human witness who can think and reason and take actions based on, whatever circumstances may be happening. So it will increase risk in some areas, right? Because regardless if they're autonomous or not, trucks are going to have to stop to refuel. Trucks are going to have to stop for maintenance. Trucks are going to have to stop for a variety of reasons. And then when they stop, there won't be a human on board. So that obviously will increase risk in those regards. Let's see here. Can you please expand on how the import tariffs have affected cargo thefts in terms of incidents and targets? So I don't think we've seen any particular tariff be in place long enough to cause a trend yet. But what they do in the short term is affect what's in demand. And cargo theft is very much a game of supply and demand. The higher the demand is for any particular product, the more attractive it is as a target for cargo thieves, because their number one goal is to liquidate it and turn it into cash as quickly as possible. So the more in demand it is, the easier it's going to be to sell. And tariffs, in some cases are going to drive shortages. In some cases are going to drive price increases. Both of those things are going to increase demand, which will increase targeting. I will say organized cargo thieves are incredibly agile to market trends, and are able to shift targets at the drop of a hat. So as soon as they notice something else being paid more attention to, or a consumer product going viral on TikTok, they're immediately going to start targeting that. Let's see here. All right, now we're getting into the new question section. Let's see here. I'm only going to be able to answer, I think, a couple more of these questions. With armed transport guards, have you heard of any legal ramifications if a guard shoots and kills a thief? I'm not sure I've heard of any. Any cases where that's happened. I know it's going to depend on where in the world you are.
Yep.
There's different regulations for armed escorts in different parts of the world, and whether or not they're even allowed to use their weapons in anything other than self-defense. So my suggestion would be consult a legal team in the jurisdiction that you're specifically inquiring about, because that would be the best way to find out specifically for that area. But it is going to differ mostly by country, but within certain countries it may differ from region to region.
Yeah, that'd be a question I'd have for the attorney of your organization.
Yep.
Because it's going to depend on where you're at. Exactly what Danny said.
Let's see here. I think this is going to be our last question, folks. Can we provide any statistics on the financial impact of thefts on companies, including costs related to labor for manufacturing, for managing theft incidents, damage to brand reputation, and any other associated expenses? Thank you. Yes, there have been a couple of studies. The most recent one, I believe, was done by TAPA, that shows between a 4 and 7x the cost of the product is what the actual financial impact to a company will be, and that comes from insurance increases, replacing the lost product, vendor relationship damage, brand damage, lost market share, investigative costs, etc. It's going to depend on exactly what the product was and if there were any extenuating circumstances as far as a particularly busy season or a time-sensitive product. But we look at anywhere between 4 and 7x the cost of the product is what the financial impact on a company is. In some cases, we see it go as high as 10 times the cost. All right, folks, I think that's all we have time for today. Once again, folks, I want to thank John Cannon for joining me today and providing his expertise and law enforcement perspective. And I want to thank everybody online for joining us and sharing your time with us today. Once again, I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but if you have any additional questions or want to meet one-on-one with anyone here at Overhaul to discuss your particular supply chain solutions, feel free to hit that free risk assessment button at the top right, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.